I love Junji Ito. He's got to be one of my all-time favorite horror artists, and just one of my favorite authors, period. For those who aren't familiar, Junji Ito is a Japanese comic artist born on July 31st, 1963. Ito had been a huge fan of comics growing up, and would eventually get his official start in 1987, with his first published work being submitted for a magazine contest, which would actually become the first installment of the long-running Tomei series. From that day forward, the world of horror manga would never be the same. Ito's stories would be serialized in various magazines throughout the 1990s, and would eventually be compiled and published as a series of books in the early 2000s. The best way to describe the average Junji Ito story collection, to me, would be that it's like a box of assorted chocolates, and that they tend to have a lot of variety. Stories can either range from horrific to tragic to just downright bizarre, and sometimes even all three. The only thing with more variety than the story's tones would have to be the extensive list of monsters, freaks, and cosmic terrors seen throughout all of Ito's works over the years. From iconic creeps like Tomei and Miss Fuji, to more obscure ghouls like the Scarecrows, the Rib Woman, and the Ice Cream Truck. Yeah, these stories can get pretty weird. The point I'm getting at is, there's been a lot of cool and creepy things featured in Ito's work, and the purpose of this series is to give them each a moment in the limelight. On that note, I think the subject of today's episode is long overdue for her time to shine. So let's take a bite right into the history of the Feathered Fiend, the antagonistic avian herself, Blackbird. Blackbird was first introduced in the story of the same name, making its debut in the story collection Fragments of Horror, which was released in 2014 and is one of my personal favorites. Blackbird's origins and motives are shrouded in mystery and are never fully explored in the story itself, but being a short story, it's to be expected. We're just here to be spooked and not hear someone's life story. One thing that is certain about her, however, she's extremely dangerous. And if I'm going to elaborate any further, we're going to have to get into some serious spoiler territory for the rest of the video. So if you'd like to experience the story's creepiness and twists firsthand, I implore you to read it for yourself, okay? To give a brief synopsis of the story, it begins with a hiker finding an injured but still alive man and takes him to the hospital. The man explains that he managed to survive for days off of the food in his backpack, but you can tell there's something amiss. Later that night, our protagonist, who had decided to stay the night in the hospital room, wakes up to find that the real reason the man survived in the woods for all that time followed him. Short story short, it's all downhill from there. Let's actually take a minute to talk about her appearance for a bit. Blackbird takes several different forms throughout the story, ranging from a pale, slender woman dressed in black, a giant, black bird, and even an eerie hybrid of the two towards the end. One consistent thing between all the forms, besides the black obviously, is her mouth filled with many long needle-like teeth, giving her such an award-winning smile, and an easy way to tear you limb from limb. And if flight and razor-sharp teeth weren't bad enough, somehow, someway, this thing can and will find you, no matter where or when you are. That's right, this thing can fucking time travel. It's never touched upon how exactly she can do it or why, she just does. But that's just horror for you. Not knowing just makes it all the more creepy. As stated earlier, we know very little about her actual personality and motives. However, from what little bits and pieces we can gather in the story, one thing is certain. She's a sly and sadistic creature, willing to play the long game with her victims, even if it takes her years. This disturbing game always seems to start out innocent enough. She'll seek out anyone who's injured in the forest at night, and spits raw meat and blood into their mouth, like a mama bird. Ugh. While disgusting, this actually does help keep them alive, and she'll repeat this process night after night until they're saved. Not gonna spoil where she actually gets the meat from, but let's just say, you are what you eat. Even after the person she'd been watching is rescued and out of the woods, she'll continue following them to the ends of the earth and still try to feed them. That is until she decides she's ready to sink her teeth in with absolutely no warning. As of today, Blackbird's debut story has been her sole appearance in any official Junji Ito related media, as far as I know. While it is a shame, since she's one of my favorite monsters, it's not all too shocking. With the expansive library of stories, some are just destined to be more iconic than others. Age of the story is definitely a factor too, I'd imagine, and with Blackbird being a more recent addition, she just needs to find her audience. Who knows, maybe we'll get an adaptation of the story in an anime someday. And hopefully a good one. Well, that about wraps up the first episode of this series. I hope you enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about this relatively unknown creep. I'm really looking forward to diving into more of Ito's works. And if you have any monsters or stories you'd like to see me cover in an episode one day, feel free to comment. And remember, don't go into the woods at night, because you never know what might just end up following you.